This is his home. He's happy here.
Hey, what's poppin', players? I'm a Sega collector. I call myself that because I've been collecting Sega and Sonic the Hedgehog merchandise for almost my whole life. A lot of my hardware, software, and collectibles were passed down to me by family, and because of that, I have a lot of vintage and very rare Sega-related merchandise not many people know about. So it's my job to talk about it. From video game spotlights, to retrospectives, and of course, reviews on figures and plushes, you can find it all here. So enough talking, let's get the ball rolling. Welcome to the Sega Collector.
Fun fact, Sega Squad, when I'm not wasting hundreds of dollars on blue plastic rats, I make art. I've plugged my art and cartoon channel Gridlock Studios like 101 times at this point. You should head over there and subscribe. But I make physical art too, and I especially like small-scale modeling. So when I was gifted my very own 3D printer by local icon JT Disco, the world of modeling opened up quite a bit for me. Specifically, I found myself able to make the Sonic figures and statues I always dreamed a company would make, but never did. I have a modest collection of 3D printed friends here, and I figured I would cover each one in order of when I made them, to show how far my skills have come. Before we get into the hedgehogs, however, allow me to introduce you to my good friend, the Anycubic Photon 4K Mono. Typically when you buy things on the cheaper side, you're getting an inferior product, but the great thing about this little guy is you're getting exactly what you paid for. It's not as large as more expensive 3D printers, but I wouldn't call this low-end machinery. For making small-scale prints, this is a fantastic printer. I typically print in white resin. The reason I do this is because resin, I feel, comes out quite smooth, and the white allows for me to see any imperfections in the print that might need to be sanded down. Now, sometimes if your settings are not right, you may get a print that looks a little messed up. Meet my latest disaster, this failed Sonic right here. As you can see, his spikes, eyes, hand, and shoes are a little visible, but I messed up and he kinda just became a big block of resin. It's always important to recenter the X-axis before you do any prints. All the way back in 2015, I 3D printed my first Sonic model, his 2006 design from, you guessed it, Sonic 06. Say what you will about the quality of that game, but I love Sonic's design in it. I feel like it was a very natural evolution of trying to make Sonic cool in the early 2000s. What was considered a cool design in the early 90s was not so cool in the 2000s, so Sonic had to change with the times. Unfortunately, no footage exists of this guy because it was so long ago, but I do have these two pictures of the young stunner. He stood around 3 inches tall, so he was a little bigger than a smaller Jakks-Pacific Sonic figure, and his articulation was limited. His arms could move back and forth, and that was about it. Now this was my very first time 3D printing and painting a print, so I'd say the final design is a little sloppy. Unfortunately, this little guy has not survived the test of time, and he broke ages ago, and his separate little limbs are scattered around in different boxes. At the same time as this print, I also printed another awesome Sega character, Billy Hatcher, who has no merchandise at all. So I'm very happy to have him, and he was a much sturdier print and still resides in my collection today. The next print I did was based on Sonic's model in Sonic R. Now, I did not actually use my own printer for this, instead I used a website that prints things for you. Don't ask me how I did this, I have no idea how it was done, but the site somehow printed the textures that were applied to the model and printed that onto the physical model. I seriously have no idea how that works, but it just makes them all the more accurate. Sonic's Sega Saturn era model is literally my favorite Sonic model ever. I love low poly. So I wanted to go all out with him and print him in a sturdier plastic, as well as print him at around 4 inches tall. So he's close to the same height as a Rosaurus Sonic. Admittedly, he is printed T-posing, but I legitimately think that's hilarious, so why change it? I like how simple the design is here. How his nose is just a weird pointed rectangle and his hands look like ice cream bars. It's incredibly charming. The guy is more so a statue and not a figure, but he's a young stunner regardless and one of my favorite pieces in my collection. Print number 3 joined us in 2020 during the pandemic lockdown. What was I to do all day being locked inside? Well, I guess I'd model a little bit. The first Sonic movie just came out at the time, yet there were no figures of Sonic based on his movie design. The best we got were these disgusting vermin who I hate. so I took it upon myself to make my very own figure using a Tomy Modern Sonic as a base. I printed a new head, new shoes, and some new hands for Movie Sonic, but kept the rest of the figure the same. Admittedly, I think I went with a little too bright a blue here, but hey, it's a cute color. I extended his legs a little bit because Movie Sonic is a bit taller, and voila! The first custom Movie Sonic action figure. Now, it is currently 2023, and we have Movie Sonic figures now, which are 100 times better than my attempt here. But I like to hold on to these figures as a sort of time capsule of what once was. One day, I'll compare my custom figure with Jax's Movie Sonic figure side by side. And finally, that brings us to a more recent project, making the Sonic Adventure 2 little figure statues. I have a whole video on the channel covering this process, much like the Movie Sonic one, if you'd like to see more behind the scenes. But these were a pain to paint. I printed them at a small scale because I wanted them to be little tiny boys, but this made them incredibly fragile and difficult to paint. Tiny details, such as Sonic's details on his gloves or the details on his soap shoes, were a nightmare to paint, and getting in between all those little crevices on the Shadow model was pretty difficult as well. But in terms of paint, I think I chose more accurate colors this time around. Sonic being more dark blue, and Shadow not just being a flat black, but a very, very dark grayish blue, which is shockingly accurate to his model in Adventure 2. Shout out to a 3D printed Knight's head that was made at the same time, but the body never came out right, so I made one out of clay. Lol. And there you have it, icons. A brief look through some of my 3D printed Sonic figures. The possibilities are pretty limitless when it comes to 3D printing, so I have every intention of making more of these little guys, so let me know. What are some specific Sonic models you'd like to see me try and print? Thanks so much for watching this video, and I'll catch you on the flip.